welcome back to MUN in Minutes. My name is Tess, and today we're going to be talking about working papers, mergers, and final resolutions. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at an example of a working paper or a final resolution. And by example, I mean the example of the very top of a working paper or final resolution. What you'll see is that the very first thing that you can see at the top of a working paper or a final resolution is the sponsors list. Sometimes sponsors list is going to be in alphabetical order. Sometimes chairs will allow you to put sponsors in whatever list you want. And then in that case, you would want to advocate for yourself in committee to be first sponsor. It looks like in this example right here, the chair wanted sponsors to be in alphabetical order. The sponsors list is going to be the list of countries that contributed their intellectual property to the paper. So it looks like France, Germany, Panama, these countries all wrote clauses that made up this working paper. You're also going to have, typically below the sponsors list, you'll have a signatories list. It doesn't have it on here, but typically in a traditional working paper or final resolution, you will have a similar line for signatories. Oftentimes, chairs will ask for a specific number of signatories to sign on to a working paper. If someone asks you to be a signatory on your paper, just say yes. It's a good way to build camaraderie in committee. Being a signatory on someone else's paper just says that you want that paper to be presented to the rest of committee. It doesn't really say anything more than that. You're also going to have the title of the paper. As you can see, the title of this working paper is Breaking Free. And then you'll have some preambulatory clauses. The preambulatory clauses for this paper are that this paper recognizes the sovereignty of Angola and understands the impacts of the colonization and decolonization process on developing countries. Typically, preambulatory clauses aren't necessary for a paper, but often they'll define some of the terms of the paper. They'll define some definitions that might be confusing for people who don't really understand the topic, or they'll kind of define the objectives of the paper. So every paper is going to be divided into different clauses. So let's look at some clause examples here. So this is clause 7 for the Breaking Free paper. Clause 7 creates the BIRD support system, BIRD standing for Building Infrastructure for Rural Development. A very important part of clause writing is that typically you want some sort of catchy acronym or catchphrase so that people remember your clause when they're flipping through the paper. You want to make sure that you're contributing as much intellectual property as possible to the paper that you're writing, especially when you're writing a working paper with 5 to 10 other countries, other delegations. You want your clauses to stand out. And when your chair flips through your paper, you want them to see all the intellectual property that you have personally contributed to your group. Also, when advocating for yourself later on down the line to present on behalf of your group, it really helps to have as many of your clauses as possible on the paper. So the BIRD Initiative has a great catchy slogan, great acronym. As you can see, it's divided into subsections. The first subsection discussing the survey board that's going to be a part of this support system, explaining how the survey board is going to work, where they're going to be based out of, what they're going to analyze. And then the second subsection shows that the survey board will issue a report recommending the potential tasks of creating a highway network and creating a rail route. So as you can see, there are a lot of specifics in this clause. They explain what's going to happen, how it's going to happen, where it's going to happen, where these people are going to be based out of, stuff like that. They also include a timeline. It says in the next 6 months. So you can really see the specifics that are taking up this clause. Let's look at another clause in this exact same paper. This is clause number 8. It creates the HUGS humanitarian grassroots system. Once again, another catchy acronym. Another thing that you're likely to remember when you're flipping through the paper. Also, a lot of specifics. It talks about working with humanitarian organizations, and they specify those humanitarian organizations. They specify that they're going to try to work with Doctors Without Borders. They specify that they're going to try to work with the Red Cross. Lots of specifics. Um, they also specify that they're going to include a 50% tax break on income tax if the NGO is for profit. So again, you can see how specific this clause is getting. They're including specific metrics, specific organizations, and specific numbers showing that there is tangible research to back up this clause. Okay, let's go over some important considerations. So, funding clause. I've seen a lot of committees and a lot of conferences get derailed when working papers and final resolutions don't have adequate means of funding. You want to make sure that somewhere in your working paper, there's a funding clause that explains how all of these things are getting funded. Now, a lot of the time, you're not really going to get fact checked on this. Usually, if I'm writing a working paper, I'll type up a quick like funding clause. I'll make it typically the first or second clause in my working paper so it's right up front, and I'll say that 0.0001% of the GDP of all participatory nations is going to fund the objectives in this specific working paper. So just make sure that you include it, but it's not something that you're really going to get quizzed on, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. Once your working paper is finalized, you'll have the opportunity to either go up for presentation or for Q&A. Now, every chair is going to be different on how many people they want to present and how many people they want to be up for Q&A. So let's say your chair says that for every working paper, 3 people are going to be able to be on presentation and 3 people are going to be on Q&A. So what does that mean? So the 3 presenters are going to be the people that present the paper in front of your entire committee. Typically, the chair will create some sort of QR code so all the members of the committee can scan it and access your paper on their personal devices. But while they're scrolling through and reading your paper, those 3 presenters are going to be presenting the different clauses that make up the paper, and they'll be going through them. After the presenters present, typically they'll be given a specific allotted time. So let's say 3 presenters get to present for 5 minutes. They'll have 5 minutes to go through their objectives of the working paper and the principal things that they're trying to accomplish in their clauses. After presentation elapses, a certain number of people will be up for Q&A. Let's say in this hypothetical, there are also 3 people that are going to be up for Q&A, and they're allowed to speak for 7 minutes. Those people that are up for Q&A will have 7 minutes to defend their working paper from possible attacks from other people that are working for other working papers. So Q&A gives the opportunity for other people in the committee who haven't worked on that specific working paper to raise their placard and ask questions about the specific objectives in the working paper and also try to poke holes at the working paper. So that would be the Q&A slot. So after presentation, after Q&A, then the working papers are going to merge. So let's say you have a committee where there are 5 working papers. Oftentimes, the chair will say, I only want to see 2 final resolutions at the end of this conference or in our final committee session. So then those 5 blocks that have written those 5 working papers now have to merge into 2 final resolutions. Typically, in that specific situation, you'll see 3 working papers merge and then a 2 working paper merger into final resolutions. Mergers often include the condensation of working papers. So, for example, you might have a 10-page working paper and a 12-page working paper, and your chair might say, all final resolutions have to be 10 pages. That means that between those 2 working papers, you're going to have to cut 2 pages of content, and you're also going to have to combine similar clauses to show that you're working together with another block of individuals. So after final resolutions have been finalized, the formatting of the final resolutions is going to be the exact same as the working paper. You're going to have the sponsors list, you're going to have the signatories list, you're going to have the title of the paper, and then you're going to have your clauses. You're going to do presentation and Q&A the exact same way as you did with your working papers. You're going to have a certain number of people up for presentation, and you're going to have a certain amount of people up for Q&A. Now, typically, the chair is not going to increase the number of presentation and Q&A spots available by very much. So if you had 3 people presenting for paper A and 3 people presenting for paper B, for that final resolution post merger, you're still probably only going to have 3 presentation spots available. So you can see how it can get very tricky between the different individuals of different blocks as you try to figure out who's going to go up for presentation and Q&A post merger. Then you'll have final voting. After all of your final resolutions have been presented, you will all, as a committee, vote on which final resolutions you want passed and which ones you don't want to pass. I hope you learned something from today's video. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of MUN in Minutes, and I hope to see you in future episodes.